ghosts, psychics, pendulums, curses, hexes. We welcome you here to Friday Night Dark in the realm of the night. Come join us and listen to this week's presentation, and we bid you welcome.
Good evening. This is Drew, and I welcome you back to Friday Night Dark. Hey, tonight, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about some magical recipes, or at least the ingredients that go with it. Why would I be doing that? Well, when I talked about bay leaves, cinnamon, and salt, I had quite a bit to cover. And, well, for good reasons, because as I mentioned in those instances, they were the three most common ingredients that could be found. And one of the things that I was touching on when I did that is I was talking about the practice of what's called herbalism, and it probably would have fit very nicely when I was talking about specific, I'm going to put in quotation marks, pseudosciences. And I really want to make sure people understand I'm not calling it something fake. Actually, herbalism, in a practical sense, it does carry with it a form of medicine and folk healing. And it does have things that did in fact work and were passed down through the generations of people who actually did that. Now, one of the things that I would point out is it's really like an early form of pharmacology. And so, of course, there's a holistic type of medicine, kind of like a natural type of, what do they call it? Diagnosis of things. And despite the fact of the obvious being culinary and aromatic, it did have with it a type of use that was not only to feed the body, but, well, I guess contend with feeding the soul, if you will. And so one thing for sure is that although I know it could be easily said that it is a pseudoscience, it has in fact been proven to work to a certain degree. Now, one thing that I've always been told by anyone who works in that particular art, yes, I will say art, is that they'll say if it don't work after a while, or if it lessens the effects but it still persists, and at that point you do need to see a doctor. And, well, honestly speaking, I can see that. But the thing about it is that as a magical practice, it can be woven into certain types of ritual work, spellcraft, ceremonial correspondences, types of protection or banishing, and some types of esoteric or witchcraft traditions. So does it actually have a use in that regard? Yes, it does. And to be honest with you, it's not just plants. They're agents, if you will, or carriers of intention or allies with metaphysical properties. And that's where it becomes kind of like a magical practice, if you will. And one of the reasons why I'm revisiting the subject is because I did in fact get asked why I brought up such subjects at the very beginning of this year. It was very apparent to me because I would be turning my back on everything that I knew and took the time and cared to learn about so many years ago. Now, I'm not going to give any open admission to one thing or another. What I am going to say is that I acknowledge and I follow and I think that if I was to deny my own past, I would not be able to learn from it. So, yeah, there's kind of a a need and a reason for it. Now, I know a lot of people would be out there and say, but you only talk about ghosts. Well, yes, I talk about ghosts. I talk about forms of divination. I've talked about types of ghosts. I've talked about ghost hunting. And then I started talking about cryptids. I've talked about certain types of weird and strange phenomenon. I've even talked about, oh, I don't know, what have I talked about? Places where weird things happen. And really, honestly, after a while, I found myself falling into this spiral of just touching on things that were kind of unexplained to a certain extent. And when I did a whole stint on pseudosciences way back when, divination is one. I talked about, what was that other one? There's a couple of them. I mean, I started talking about uses of pendulums, Ouija boards. I talked about runes, and I talked about, tarot in general. And to be honest with you, when I was talking about these things, I really saw it as, hey, I've got to do this. I need to address this other arm of everything. And what I mean is that there are people out there who will talk about how to protect themselves from those things unseen. And that's exactly how I came about the idea of talking about these things, because salt, bay leaves, cinnamon, they're a form of what you would, call a form of protection. And because I know that you have, these types of protection out there to help with this type of an approach to somebody, meaning things that cannot be seen, only felt. And even then, that's questionable. The idea is that you have ways to defend yourself. Now, one of the things that someone told me once is that when you're actually going to engage in any kind of psychic attack, a good example would probably be like, I cast a spell on you. Okay. Just say that for a second. I've had people they would come at me and say that, unless I paid them a whole bunch of money, they were going to put a voodoo curse on me. And in the background, I just said, bring it. Go ahead, bring it. No, really, I did say that. Said it a couple times. At one point, I just said, you know what? I said, I don't have time for this. And because they went through a specific platform, I just reported them. And they actually got banned. I was surprised. I didn't think they were going to, jump on them that quickly. But all they did was look at the conversation and realize the guy was literally threatening me, or the girl, or the person. I'm just going to say that because I don't know. It could have been a guy, could have been a gal. I don't know. And so they got banned. I'm sure they probably have 10 million throwaway accounts. But point being, the whole idea of what he said, and of course the first thing I thought of is I need to protect myself. Now I have little things. I've made spell jars in the past. I've given some as gifts to people very dear to me. And I've let them know that, hey, here's what you want to do. Make sure it's up here, and it goes there. And they said, oh my God, I broke it. And I'm like, okay, I'll make you another one. And I did. And assuming it's still employed and in place. The idea is that now they have something that when someone crosses, they're going to know right away if there's someone that actually wishes them harm or not. And quite honestly speaking, I don't know if it's worked. I don't know if it hasn't worked. They haven't said anything that way. But there is one thing in particular that I enjoy, and that's the fact that I did something because it was my way of, helping them out. And I think that's the one thing I wanted to take from it. And so, yes, it did in fact involve knowing certain things and just putting things together. And I learned from folks who taught me how to do things. Now, tying that into relevance. If you need to defend yourself against someone who's going to do certain things, sometimes certain agents, and that includes those ingredients and others, will help with that. So there's this confusion that does exist because you see, the problem is, I know when you have medicinal plants that often work as agents of practical types of magic, it's the same people that used some certain types of divination, charms. They might even have some ritual healing that they might do. There might be some aspect of folk magic that will be involved. Does that make it any less? No, it doesn't. Matter of fact, I would probably say to anybody, if you're going to be using any form of agent to manifest intent, and as I talked about in the past, what a spell is, there's sometimes it can be an incantation, a set of words or whatnot, and you don't have to be a poet. It can be a simple phrase. And your breath shall stink until, I don't know, the 12th of never. Okay, I'm saying it that way for a reason because I did an experiment. I know a lot of people out there saying, Drew, you did what? Yes, I know. I made an experiment. And I wanted to see if something like this would work. What I didn't expect is that said experiment would work. A while back, as you may know, I was kind of looking for some work and what have you, and I decided I was going to give it a try. I got a bay leaf out, wrote on there my intent. The intent was pretty straight. I'm looking for a job, so I wrote down, I wish to find a job where I can be employed and be able to do the things that I do and know best. Yes, so I went out, took it outside, and I set fire to the bay leaf. And it crackled and it burned and it did all kinds of scary stuff. Really, honestly, I was a little like, is this thing gonna set me on fire? And it just did its thing. Lo and behold, after it burned, the ashes themselves scattered to the wind quickly. And to be honest, I don't think there was any fear in my eyes, being that it was the dead of winter. And although this is probably one of the driest winters I've ever experienced here in the state of Utah, I almost felt like for a moment I returned to Los Angeles. No, really, I did. But when I set that out there and did that, I didn't think anything of it. And within 2 days, I was in the interview process and found myself getting hired. So someone will say, oh, it was just timing. Well, it might have been, but it was almost immediately after I did that. So does it work? I don't know. Does it not work? I wouldn't bet on that. You see, intent is intent. And that's one of the reasons why I did that. And this open admission of what is going on here and how it pertains to my subject tonight is that although I don't think it's something completely in the herbs and the botanicals that you might utilize in the practicing of magic, great for cooking perhaps, practicing in magic, it could be an enhancer. It could be those tools that, help manifest and focus on the things that you need to. I probably could have used a crystal, perhaps maybe just lit a candle. I could have used oils, perhaps, and I've talked about that in the past. But in this instance, I was putting something to a test, because if it was able to manifest for me a job, I can imagine that maybe I could do that for other things. Now, I don't know if dreaming up the winning numbers to win lotto is a thing, but seeing the record jackpots that have been out there close to $1 billion or $1.5 billion, all I could say is I'm happy for the people who won it, and I hope somewhere in there that they decide to do something for themselves first, and then hopefully they might reach out to other people. And, I told people once I would go on a walkabout. Anyone who had any kind of layaway, I'd be paying it off in secret. Amongst other things, to be honest with you, I'd want to be that guy. The one that would kind of hand people out a second chance, give them what they need. And I promised people within the family, oh yeah, I'll help you out. And then on top of that, I also promised that I would go on this trip, not just around the country, but then I would probably leave the country and just go other places. There's two countries in particular I would love to visit. One of them happens to be Japan. I won't make a secret of that because I always wanted to go there. But the other place I would like to go would be to France. And more specifically, I have two locations. One of them is going to be the catacombs, if I'm right, there underneath Paris. But the other one would be Lourdes itself. And anyone who knows the city will know exactly why I'd be headed there. I would like to see and test if, in fact, what happens is what happens to me. Maybe not, because, I keep thinking of Steve Martin when he was in that Leap of Faith movie, and the insurance policy is that if you didn't get cured by God's touch, then, of course, it was because you didn't have the faith. No, really, that's precisely what was said in there. I don't know if that's going to be something that someone's going to come at me for. Don't much care, because it's a test. Remember, I know a lot of people will probably say to me, I thought you want to believe. I do. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to try to test things. And so circumstances fell in my favor for one test. That would be another one. But I digress. I was talking about the winning numbers to Lotto. Now, if the people out there who won, did they burn bay leaves? Did they blow cinnamon in their door? Did they do anything of the sort? I can't say. What I will say is that regardless of what they did to win and pick the numbers that they did, they won. They got all the numbers. And now, well, as the old phrase goes, they're richer than Croesus. They might maybe meet some of the other folks that have, deep pockets. But it also makes you a target. So I'm sure they're going to stay in anonymity. May they always do the right thing, and may they always find happiness in helping others. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, getting back to everything here, I know that there is kind of like this liminal archetypal sense that goes along with herbalism and some of the magical practices from the very same ingredients that are there. Plants themselves are intermediaries between worlds, and the roots and leaves as carriers of like a kind of mythic memory, if you will. So if in fact, you're interacting with a symbolic landscape by, the smoke or the scent or by ingestion of said herbs or whatnot, certainly there's going to be that one thing. Now, as far as magical ritual stuff, I don't know if I would inherently call it something occultish by means, but because I know it serves that purpose, I would probably say that it can also serve as a purpose of healing. And so it does go to that one, what do they call it? The reed, that you do as you will, but harm none. And I think part of it would be that, is that if something is there and someone has fallen ill, if you have the skills to at least make them somewhat better, if not completely, why not use those skills? Because you're doing as you will. You want to be able to help them, right? And you're not harming them. Because if you left them there, you would be. That's the way to look at it, I think. But that's my own thoughts. So let's talk about that for a second. I mean, there's all kinds of different ones, and I know that there was a code for it. As a matter of fact, I touched on it recently when I was talking about, there's that, there's an eye of newt and a tail of rat. But that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of talking about this, is because, in a sense, if you look at some of the things in those Shakespearean plays with those witches that, bubble, bubble, toil and trouble and what have you, and this is not the first time I've made mention of this, but they did talk about things like from eye of newt to toe of frog. And believe it or not, they're not literal in terms. No, actually, there's something else. They mean something, they're code. And probably the reason why they did it is because they didn't want people knowing. And I know if people know about Macbeth, in this context, they'll know that Eye of Newt refers to mustard seeds. And, this is where that magical practice crosses over, because I know there's a lot of folks out there say, oh, it's the devil. Whoa. And it's like, okay, yeah, look, calm down, dude. Because I can make a biblical reference to you that someone who had the faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. And, well, isn't it ironic that an eye of newt or a mustard seed is part of what would be in somebody's apothecary and herbal list of things to use? And in some case, it shows that some of these words that were used were more of a metaphorical representation rather than a literal animal part. And so I found a few others that I figure if you're going to listen this far, why not give you some other ones to look at? Tail of a rat. That's actually a radish. There is a rat tail radish that you can get. It's almost like a cross between a parsnip and a radish itself. Some people have said it's a form of turnip. Now, I've never had one, but I did my research on that one. And, well, it's something you can grow, but it has to be grown in certain conditions. Don't know if that would work here in Utah, but I think I'm going to stick to the basics. Turnips, radishes, and parsnips for me, thank you. Anyhow, there was a few others that I found. Toe of frog. You're probably thinking, ew, disgusting toe of frog. Okay, yes, I know. Buttercup leaves are what they are. Now there's another one, wool of bat. Now, this one, it did a little, I had to do a little thinking and a little bit digging on that one. And guess what? It's actually moss. Now, moss is something that can be used for the idea of, what do you call it? Covering up stuff, a wound or whatnot. And it helps to also reduce swelling in some cases. But I haven't used it, and I don't know exactly what moss they were talking about, but I would imagine it's going to be a dark color. And so if in fact it is moss, then so be it. There's a couple of other ones. There's a whole list of different ones, but I am going to continue with just some other ones. Owlet's wings or owl feathers. I guess that's more of a symbolic thing, but I have seen where it's... what is it? Blindworm sting, which apparently is a kind of thing that's like a small snake. Blindworm is something that can and could be used and had some medicinal purposes. Now, exactly to what extent, I can't say because I couldn't find much on that one, but it's there. But there were other ones. There was one that was it wild cabbage? It's a common weed. And also dandelion itself, which the leaves of it, I know in those cases, both of them have what they call anesthetic and also can cure certain aspects of like a cold or a fever or whatnot. As a matter of fact, feverfew is another one that I found that actually, if used in a tincture, that would actually help reduce a headache or reduce the a fever if someone had the flu or something like that. So they did have purposes, and they did exactly what they were supposed to. And I know that folks that utilized magic or were an herbalist often used such coded names to protect the knowledge that they had, much like they would have a coveted grimoire or a book of magic. Alchemists and herbalists alike have usually a tome of knowledge that is not only written in, but then it would be kept well out of sight. That is their knowledge, and they protect it with everything, including their life. And that is one of the things that I think is what makes it kind of like more of the mysterious side. See, the whole idea of utilizing plants and magic, in magic, should I say, and utilizing that knowledge, you're going to protect it all. And so that's why these codes were used and invented. And I think they were shared by some, but not all. And if in fact there's anything to be said about it, I would just tell you this. The idea of using herbs, not only to manifest in spells, but also to heal, to help, to make better, make well, only enhances one and utilizes the environment around them. One day, I know I'm going to be touching on the very idea of the use of magic. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start talking about these things, because it does actually cross into a different realm, one that, well, curses and hexes themselves come from. Not everyone agrees on what curses and hexes will and can do, but what I will mention is that in every one of them, there is some invocation and utterance of a higher force, and in some cases, those hexes, they use very basic ingredients one can find in a kitchen. So, does it make it any less? No, it doesn't. It makes it more, because that means that everyone's kitchen can become an armory, an apothecary, and, well, if utilized correctly, both. They can protect, and they can heal, and they can enhance, and they can manifest. And that's really the important part here, why I bring all this up. I think it's kind of nice to be able to share this with everybody, and for good reason. Because at the end of the day, as I share these ideas with you, you and I both know that I'm trying to, well, foment some kind of curiosity. And for that matter, I'm trying to make sure that you understand that if you go out on that road, it might be something that will be a world of discovery. And I don't think it's, in any way, shape, or form, a bad thing. To be curious is how some of these things were found and how people realized that you could heal. And for that matter, that you could do things. And consequently, if you look at some of the sciences that we have, they did have roots in things that people called pseudosciences. So there is relevance to all of this. And honestly, pharmacology itself owes everything that it has to people who might otherwise be very sick. Yes, I know. I'm just kind of putting it out there. Well, with that, do you ever think, or did you ever consider utilizing herbs for, well, trying to win the lottery, or maybe just get well, or maybe manifest that job that you're looking for? The only way you're going to find out is to try it, right? Well, if you find yourself asking questions and you start talking to people about what you figured out, or for that matter, what you learned and how you want to explore, somewhere in there I'm hoping that you might decide to talk about it with me. Where else? Friday Night Dark at nighttracks.com. Hey, this is Drew, and I bid you good night.